104.5, the team, your home for New York Yankees baseball and, of course, all the Major League Baseball playoffs. We are joined by my man, Mr. Insider, Mr. Baseball in my world, even though I get yelled at for calling you that because they say it's Bob Uecker, but it's you to me. Buster only. Buster, let me just, as a Yankee fan, let me just say what we've all been saying. Andrew bleeping Miller.
Just unbelievable. What he did in that series against Toronto, 25 batters faced, 14 strikeouts. He still hasn't allowed a run in the postseason ever. And, today I talked to Raul Ibanez on the podcast, and he was talking about, just how difficult it is for anybody, right-handed, left-handed, to deal with Andrew Miller's slider. And, it said a lot the other day when I asked John Gibbons, the Blue Jays manager, about, okay, do any of your hitters, can they make adjustments? And he said, basically, if he's on, we have no chance. And how often do you hear a major league manager say that? But that's how great he was in this series. And, as that fifth game was going along, it was like he was Jaws looming out in the bullpen if you were the Blue Jays, because you knew at some point you were going to hear that music with him coming out and knowing that you weren't going to be able to score for the next couple of innings.
Buster, is it too soon to say that the Yankees made a mistake moving Andrew Miller? Just asking.
I don't think they made a mistake at all. I think they did the exact right thing because, look, he's a short reliever, and he's someone who potentially could help Cleveland win the World Series. He's already basically propelled them to get there. But they had such a tremendous need for depth in their farm system and for getting help. And, over time, when we see what Justice Sheffield does and we see what Clint Frazier does, the two prime prospects they got in the deal or the other two guys they got in the deal, then you can judge whether or not they got the proper value. But in terms of the timing, as we talked about all year, absolutely it was the right thing to do. And I can tell you this, within the Yankee organization, you might think that they were sitting there gnashing their teeth when Andrew Miller was doing what he was doing. They were actually really happy because Brian Cashman's argument to teams that were talking about the possible Andrew Miller trade was, if you get this guy, if you pay the price to get this guy, he could help you get to the World Series. And Brian turned out to be exactly right in what he told the Indians about the potential impact of Andrew.
So, Buster, the guy who gets the MVP for the ALCS is a middle reliever, basically. How in the world is Cleveland doing this?
Well, they're a lot better team than what people realize. We spoke so much during the American League Championship Series about their rotation issues, which are 100% real, because they lost Danny Salazar and they lost Carlos Carrasco, and then Trevor Bauer had a drone accident last Friday morning, and it left them scrambling. But I will tell you that I saw every game they played in the division series against the Red Sox in person. I saw the entire series against the Blue Jays in person. That team runs the bases better than any team I've ever seen in terms of consistency of how they look for the extra 90 feet. They have a very underrated lineup because they have a lot of tough outs, and they have some switch hitters, which make it difficult for the opposing manager to match up. And they had that incredible bullpen. And they are going to be a dangerous team. There's no question. Going into the World Series, whether it's the Cubs or the Dodgers, they're going to be underdogs, but they will be extremely dangerous, and would not at all surprise me if Andrew Miller and the other Indians are dogpiling at the end of that World Series.
Buster only with us right now, Levack Goz on 104.5, the team, ESPN Radio.
Cubs now have a 3-2 lead in this series. Have they figured out their hitting problems?
I think they have, and give credit to Anthony Rizzo and Addison Russell, because you guys have seen situations where hitters fall into funks in October amid much greater scrutiny, all kinds of pressure, and most of the time you don't see hitters work out of it in October. And for those two guys to take a big step forward and to dig their way out, it's such a difference-making situation. There's no doubt that team absolutely reminds me of the progression through this postseason of what we saw with the '98 Yankees, where they fell behind that team in 1998, behind the Indians in the American League Championship Series, 2-1, just like the Cubs just did to the Dodgers, and then Game 4 turned it around, and that's the way it feels for the Cubs right now. The fact that they, got the home run from Addison Russell, that they got the home run from Anthony Rizzo, the depth in their lineup was restored, and they came back and won Game 5, and we'll see if they can finish it off against two pretty tough pitchers in Game 6 and 7.
So, Buster, you wouldn't be shocked if it's Cleveland versus Chicago for the World Series?
No, and I'll among the many stupid picks I made at the beginning of the year, I did pick the Cubs to win the World Series back in January, and I'll hang on that one as long as I possibly can. I mean, let's face it, it's a tough challenge for the Cubs in Game 6 because they're going to be facing the best pitcher on the planet in Clayton Kershaw, and their approach at the plate is going to be fascinating because you saw the Nationals, and when that series finished up, where their attitude was, you know what, we're going to work the count against Clayton Kershaw. We're going to take a pitch the first time through, and all that meant was strike one. And they got behind, and they didn't really run up his pitch count. So it'll be interesting to see if the Cubs can create any sort of traction in getting Kershaw's pitch count up. It kind of reminds me of those old Yankee games against Pedro Martinez, where that's the real challenge for the Cubs. Get Kershaw out of that game and get to the soft underbelly of the Dodgers bullpen.
For some people, they believe that narrative now for Kershaw that he struggled in the postseason is starting to change after some of his performances so far in this postseason. What's it going to take for him to at least go, I guess, nationally and say, hey, Kershaw can actually get it done in the postseason here in Game 6?
Well, I know how my brethren work in that regard, and I think unless you see Clayton Kershaw climbing on top of a championship dog pile that, like we were just talking about, at the end of the World Series, I don't think that necessarily will ever go away. At this point, I think it's ridiculous. I don't think it's fair, that whole narrative. I mean, Kershaw certainly pitched a lot better even before this postseason began than what he was given credit for when you look at the individual games he had, and then he's just done yeoman's work in this postseason. You wish you would go away, but the reality is that when you're, the guy who's paid more than any other pitcher and you're as big of a stature, it's kind of like an NFL quarterback, right? That winning the World Series validates once and for all a player of Kershaw's stature.
Buster, only with us right now, 104.5, the team, ESPN Radio. So, Buster, I'm, everywhere I go now, Mets fans come up to me and go, how come every time you talk to Buster, you don't ask him what's going to happen with Giannis Cespedes?
Yeah, well, and I think it's pretty, at this point, it would seem fairly clear that, and I know that the Mets expect him that he's going to opt out of the contract or at least use that leverage to try to get a bigger deal. But I will tell you this, when you look at the market circumstance, and I just literally got off the phone before talking with you guys with one of the general managers who's going to be looking for corner power bat, it is going to be an absolutely flood of options in the marketplace. So if the Mets, let's say that Cespedes decides he's going to opt out, that he can get a bigger contract elsewhere, it's far from a disaster situation for the Mets because there are just going to be so many guys available. Jose Bautista, Edwin Encarnacion. I know, Encarnacion isn't necessarily the fit for the Mets because he's a first baseman DH type guy as opposed to Bautista, who's an outfielder. But all of those guys contribute to the volume and the options. Brandon Moss, Carlos Beltran, on and on. Matt Holliday, Mark Trumbo. There's so many guys available this winter that no matter what happens, the Mets will be able to find solutions. And I'll throw one more in there, and I wrote in my column today, what about Ian Kinsler of the Tigers? Because the Tigers have told other teams, look, we're looking to cut payroll, we're looking to move some salary, make an offer on our guys, and we will respond. And Kinsler, in a lot of ways, would be a nice fit for the Mets.
Buster, that quote from the Tigers sounds kind of familiar to me.
And it absolutely comes from, I think they are following in the footsteps of what we saw from the Yankees this year. That, they're not out there saying we're going to have a total fire sale, it's a complete rebuild, we're going to go down to bare bones. Their feeling is we want to restructure, we want to retool, we want to get younger, and we want to try to compete in 2017. And we will listen on offers to Miguel Cabrera and Justin Verlander and Victor Martinez. Basically, anybody on their roster they'll listen for in an effort to get younger and to pair payroll.
Is it? I mean, it's not realistic like Miggy Cabrera is on a different team, though, right?
I don't think it's realistic because at the time that he signed his extension that he's currently playing under, people around baseball were saying, oh, my God, what an incredibly stupid contract they gave him. And the situation now sort of illuminates that. He turns 34 next April. All he's got left on his contract is 7 years and $212 million, okay? So it probably is going to be very difficult for the Tigers to deal him unless they're willing to eat a whole lot of money, and that would be a major PR hit for them if they were actually trying to do that.
We're not going to see this guy's price tag get that high, but Aroldis Chapman, depending on the success he has here in the postseason, is his price going to be driven so high that maybe even the Yankees don't go after him?
Well, I don't know about that because it's been interesting. I actually talked with an evaluator yesterday who noted that, the Cubs have tried to use him the way that the Indians have with Andrew Miller, where it's just more than 3 outs or more than one inning. Different. They're trying to use him in the same way the Dodgers have used Kenley Jansen. And have you noticed? He's kind of gotten hit around a little bit.
Yeah.
He hasn't been perfect. And in this marketplace, remember, you already have Kenley Jansen, who's probably going to be the most coveted reliever. You already have Mark Melancon, and then you have Aroldis Chapman. You have some other guys. I mean, look, Aroldis Chapman's not going to lack for food money, okay? He's going to do pretty well for himself, but I don't know if the bidding war frenzy is going to be as high for him as it's going to be maybe for Kenley Jansen.
Buster only with us right now. If you're an insider, you get all his stuff at ESPN.com. Buster, Cleveland cooperated with you. They allowed you to have a home life. What is the life of Buster going to be?
Leaves and lawn, right? You guys have seen that. When you guys go through that section at the supermarket when they got the lawn and leaf bags, that's where I'm living during the next 3 days.
And then, all right, so you get 3 days off, and then you're on the road.
And then I hit the road, on Monday, going to Cleveland for the start of the World Series, and I can't wait because it's going to be great either way, and the Indians are such a fun story.
Did you hear the rumor they were going to get Sheen to throw out the first pitch as Wild Thing Rick Vaughn?
Well, I know that he's asked for it, right? And it's actually a great debate topic. If you are the Cleveland Indians, do you want to bring Charlie Sheen back, A, being as unusual as he is, okay, or B, someone who's in a movie that reminds everybody about how bad your franchise has been. I don't know if I want to go there. Actually, I give credit to one of my colleagues, Justin Havens, on the podcast today. He suggested that what you could have is that, say, before Game 2, if you need a little jolt with your crowd, have Charlie Sheen in full Wild Thing garb come running out of the Indians' bullpen and go into the mound. That would get the crowd going.
Hashtag winning, hashtag Tiger Blood. Buster, what else is going on in the podcast lately?
Well, today, actually, we got Ryan Merritt, who the Game 5 hero for the Cleveland Indians. And he's a really cool story because literally a week ago today, he had no idea he was even going to be on the roster, and all he did was start the clinching game. And a funny thing has happened, for a 24-year-old who had 4 games in the big leagues before that start. He and his fiancée are scheduled to get married on January 27th, and since that game the other day, Indians fans have been going on to his wedding registry and buying up all the gifts. I literally talked to him 5 minutes ago, and he mentioned to me that when he checked this morning, all but 3 items have been paid for his wedding registry.
Wow. That's amazing. That's fan. Good job, Indians fans. Buster, enjoy the lease and lawn, and then the road trip, and we'll be harassing you in the very near future.
That sounds great, guys.